The first thing that
Here,
hit
you
me was
might
the
need
silence.
this.
Oh,
Not the
thanks a lot.
peaceful
No
kind, but the
problem.
kind that feels like the
Appreciate it.
world is holding its breath. It was 2:07 in the afternoon, sunlight pouring through the thin curtains of our small apartment, when my new roommate stood in the doorway of my room holding a blanket with shaking hands. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red, like she hadn't slept in days. She asked for the blanket in a voice so quiet it barely reached me. Something in my chest tightened, because fear like that doesn't come from the cold. It comes from being hunted. And in that moment, without knowing how or why, I realized she wasn't just asking for warmth. She was hiding. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small decision can change a life, take a second right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter, and so does the community we build around them. Her name was Maribel Reyes, and she had moved in just 3 days earlier. I was Ion Malik, a freelance videographer barely holding my life together after a rough year of cancelled projects and unpaid bills. The apartment was nothing special, just a sunlit third floor walk up near a busy market, chosen mostly because it was cheap and close to everything. When Maribel arrived with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box taped shut, I noticed how she smiled too quickly, like she was trying to convince the world she was fine. She said she worked remotely, that she liked mornings, that she didn't make much noise. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of details people share when they don't want to share the real story. Those first few days passed quietly. We crossed paths in the kitchen during daylight hours, exchanged polite nods, talked about groceries and electricity bills. She spent most of her time by the window in the living room, curtains half open, eyes following the street below. I thought she was just new, adjusting, maybe lonely. I didn't think much of the way she flinched whenever a car horn blared or how she checked the locks twice every afternoon. People carry their own ghosts. I had my own, so I didn't question hers. The afternoon she asked for the blanket, the city outside was alive. Vendors shouting, children running home from school, sunlight bouncing off passing buses. Nothing about the world suggested danger. Yet Maribel stood there trembling, fingers clutching the fabric like it was the last solid thing left. I handed it to her, and when our hands brushed, I felt how cold she was despite the warm day. She retreated to her room without another word. That should have been the end of it. But something kept gnawing at me, an instinct I hadn't felt since my father taught me to trust my gut. An hour later, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street, engine running, windows tinted. I noticed because it hadn't been there before, and because Maribel's room light flickered off as soon as it appeared. I told myself I was being dramatic. Cities are full of parked cars. But when it was still there after sunset, when the sky turned amber and then purple, unease settled deep in my bones. That night, sleep refused to come. Not because of noise, but because of the feeling that something was wrong. Around midnight, I heard soft movement from Maribel's room, like someone pacing. At 2 a.m., the sound stopped. In the silence, I remembered her eyes, the way they darted toward the window even during the brightest hours of the day. I remembered the cold in her hands. And suddenly, the pieces clicked together in a way that made my stomach drop. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of being seen. The next morning, daylight exposed things darkness had hidden. The sedan was gone, but fresh tire marks curved along the curb. Maribel didn't come out of her room until noon. When she did, she looked smaller, wrapped tightly in the blanket she'd asked for, like it was armor. She tried to smile, but it cracked under the weight of whatever she was carrying. That was when I made a choice that would change both our lives. I didn't ask casual questions. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I simply told her that if she ever felt unsafe, she wasn't alone in that apartment. She broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, exhausted way that hurt more to witness. She told me pieces, not everything. Enough to understand. She had been a data analyst for a nonprofit exposing financial fraud. She had uncovered something she wasn't supposed to, names tied to powerful people. Whistleblowing sounded heroic when you read about it online. In real life, it meant losing your job, your home, and your sense of safety overnight. She had moved cities twice in 6 months. Changed numbers. Deleted social media. Still, someone had found her. The sedan wasn't random. It was a warning. She was the target. Fear is contagious. Once it enters a space, it spreads fast. I felt it seep into the walls, into my routines, into my sleep. Every knock at the door made my heart race. Every unfamiliar face on the street felt like a threat. I considered asking her to leave, not because I didn't care, but because I was scared. I wasn't trained for this. I was just a guy with a camera and overdue rent. Protecting someone from unseen enemies wasn't part of the plan. But then I thought about what it meant to turn her away. About how many doors had already closed on her. And I knew I couldn't do it. We adjusted our lives quietly. Daytime errands only. Curtains angled just enough to let light in without revealing silhouettes. We created small routines, shared meals when the sun was up, worked side by side in silence. In those ordinary moments, I saw who Maribel really was beyond the fear. She laughed softly at old sitcoms. She watered the dying plant on the windowsill every morning, whispering encouragement like it could hear her. She had a kindness that hadn't been crushed, just buried under layers of caution. The tension peaked one afternoon when a man knocked on the door claiming to be from the building management. His badge looked real, his smile polite, but his eyes scanned the apartment too carefully. I stood between him and the hallway, heart pounding, inventing excuses until he left. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Maribel pressed against the wall, breath shallow, eyes wide with recognition. That night, she admitted she couldn't keep running forever. Hiding had kept her alive, but it was slowly killing her spirit. What happened next wasn't brave in a cinematic way. There were no dramatic confrontations, no heroic speeches. It was a series of small, difficult steps taken in daylight. We contacted a journalist she trusted. She shared her evidence. I used my skills to help anonymize files, secure backups, tell her story without revealing her location. Each step felt like walking a tightrope, but with every action, I saw a change in her. The fear didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. Purpose began to replace panic. The day the article was published, the city looked the same. Sunlight, traffic, people rushing by. But inside our apartment, everything was different. The threats didn't disappear overnight, but they shifted. Eyes turned toward the story instead of the woman hiding behind it. Maribel wasn't invisible anymore, and that visibility, strangely enough, became her shield. Powerful people prefer silence. Exposure made her harder to erase. Weeks passed. The sedan never returned. Maribel started opening the curtains fully. Again, letting the sun flood her room. She slept without the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. I noticed I slept better too. Fear had shrunk, replaced by something steadier. Trust. Not just in each other, but in the idea that doing the right thing, even quietly, matters. If this story is touching something inside you, if it's reminding you that courage doesn't always roar and kindness doesn't always announce itself, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, share, and engage. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Maribel moved out 3 months later, not because she was running, but because she was finally moving forward. She had a new job, new safeguards, a cautious but real smile. On her last day, she left the blanket folded neatly on the couch. It smelled faintly of laundry soap and sunlight. A simple object, heavy with meaning. Before this story ends, I have a special request for you. Comment one word below that represents what this story made you feel. Hope, fear, kindness, courage. Your words matter more than you think. Sometimes, being a hero looks like offering a blanket in the middle of the day. Sometimes, it's choosing not to look away when you realize someone is a target. I didn't save Maribel. She saved herself. I just stood beside her long enough for her to remember who she was. And that realization changed me too. Because in a world that often feels dangerous and indifferent, choosing to care is the most powerful thing we can do.